What is up, guys? This is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift, and today I'm bringing all of you guys my updated Geargia deck profile for this brand new July 2015 format. So, now with this brand new format and the banning of the Jinlock essentially from Necros, I really do feel that a lot of the rogue strategies can actually perform quite well now, just because they don't have to really worry about the Necros matchup and their Jinlock as much anymore, as we probably all know how it's not really fun to be locked under the Jinlock with no out. So because that whole play is gone from the Necros deck, I really did like to go back into some of my old rogue strategies and really just improve them for this format. And of course, thanks to you guys recommending Geargia to me, I did go back and revise my Geargia list, and I'm going to bring it all to you guys today. So let's get right into it. Starting off with the main deck as usual. Alrighty then, first off, we have our 3 copies of Geargia Armor, because Armor is our general +1 guy. He is probably the best Geargia +1 monster in this whole deck, so of course we have to run 3 of him because we want to see him as early as we can. Moving on, we have our 3 copies of Geargia Arsenal, because Arsenal is our lone Fire Blossom that usually will just be grabbing us our Geargia Armors to help us, again, get those +1s. Then, next up, we have our 3 copies of Geargia Accelerator, because Accelerator is the one that can help us spam the heck out of our rank 4s, and it can help us essentially keep making our Gaigets almost for free. So that is pretty much the main core 9 Geargia monsters we do run. Now, moving on to the other Geargia monsters we run, we have actually 2 copies of Geargia Augur now. Now, I have decided to put Augur back into the deck for the fact that I wanted to make this deck as consistent as possible and to give it as much plays as it can possibly get. But I know I've been giving Augur a lot of junk for just being a really restrictive card in that it locks you out of your battle phase, as well as it can only let you special summon machine-type monsters whenever you use its effect. So you really cannot toolbox with Augur as much as something like compared to Armor. But the fact is that, again, I really wanted to make this deck as consistent as possible, and I tried to work around the Augur restrictions and include cards within this deck to make the Augur play a little bit more viable, and I'll get into those cards when we get to them in this profile. But yeah, I actually do run 2 Augur now. Moving on to the Geargiano monsters, we have our 2 copies of Mark II and our 1 copy of Mark I. I don't like Mark III. I know a lot of people say that Mark III can help you with some certain plays, but I really don't like Mark III for the fact that it locks you out of your Gear Geigen X, and because of that, it just, in my opinion, it really isn't that good of a card to run at all. So I decided to not run it and just run 2 copies of Mark II and 1 copy of Mark I. Now, Mark II is probably the better one out of the bunch, so I did decide to run 2 copies of him, and then we have the 1 Geargiano just to act as a name, and probably to just be the target for our Gear Geigen X's to float into. Alright, so that will be it for the Geargia aspect of our deck. Moving on to the supporting cards in the monster lineup. We have actually 2 copies of Traptrix Mermelio for the fact that Clyford is still a thing, and it's still a very strong thing. So I wanted to have ways to kind of combat that matchup in the sense that I have a way to search out Bottomless now, as well as we can use Mermelio to become our back row removal, as we do not mainboard MST in this deck. So of course, just having general back row removal in the form of Mermelio is also really, really nice. Then we have the 1 copy of Thunder King Ryo, because we do not like Necros or Satellar Knights or Clyford or all those decks that search a ton. So of course we have to have the 1 Thunder King just to lock them down a little bit more. And then finally, for the last monster we do run, we actually do have the 1 copy of Genix Ally Birdman still. Now, I know Birdman is pretty much a staple in the Karakuri variants of this deck, but I actually decided to put the Birdman back into this pure variant for the fact that even though it isn't a synchro-heavy deck, you can still abuse Birdman's effect by bouncing accelerators to special Birdman and then special summoning the accelerator for free. So essentially, you can use Birdman as a free special summonable tuner at times. So because of that, there is some very strong synchro monsters that I wanted to include in this list, which is why, again, we have the Birdman. So then, that will wrap it up for our monster cards. Moving on to our spell cards. We'll start off with the 2 copies of Iron Call. Now, a subscriber actually mentioned this card to me in my last Geargia profile, and after reading up on the card and basically testing it out, I really did find to actually like the card, because what it essentially does for this deck is it is a proactive Call of the Haunted. Now, what I mean by that is that it is a spell card, and it isn't a trap card like Call of the Haunted, and because of that, you can actually use this card as soon as you see it, which can be a little bit faster, as well as you can actually pair Iron Call with Geargia Augur, and you can actually make a better play than rather than summoning Augur, getting accelerated, making Gigan, and then passing. You can actually use Iron Call alongside Augur now to actually make two Gear Gigan X's, and then ending with another accelerator also in hand. So it kind of sets you up better in those Augur plays, as well as, again, it just acts as a Call of the Hunted for this deck, but it is a spell card, so it is just fairly strong in my opinion. Moving on, we have our two copies of Forbidden Lance, just for general back row protection and protection from things like skill drain and whatnot. Again, I didn't want to include MSTs in this deck for the fact that Nekraz doesn't run any traps, and again, I kind of want to have a decent matchup against that deck, so I did decide to put Forbidden Lance instead of MST in this deck. Moving on, we have three more one-of spell cards in the form of one Soul Charge to get just more monster recursion. We have our one copy of Book of Moon, because Book is still a very, very good spell. And of course, following suit, we have the one Raigeki, because board nuking is always fun. So that will be it for our spell lineup. Moving on to our trap cards, we're going to start off with the obligatory one copy of Geargia Gear, because it is a one card rank 4, which usually will be your Gear Gigan X. So of course, just any one card extra deck monster is really, really nice. Then we have our three copies of Call of the Haunted. Now, I have the three copies of Call of the Haunted alongside the Iron Call. I know it might seem kind of counterproductive to say that Iron Call probably is better than Call of the Haunted, but the fact is that you can actually dead draw Iron Call a bit more than Call of the Haunted, so that is why I'd rather have the three copies of Call of the Haunted rather than Iron Call, just because you really can't dead draw Call of the Haunted unless you don't have any monsters in grave for some odd reason. Now then, moving on, we have our three copies of Fiendish Chain, because we don't like effects, we don't like Nekraz of Trishula and all those scary effects. So of course we have to have the Fiendish Chain just to negate them all. And again, I like Fiendish Chain in this deck better just because majority of your monsters aren't that big, as the best archetype specific monster you can make is Gear Gigan X again, and he only sits at 2300. So that isn't really much, so just having ways to stop attacks is really, really nice. Then we have the two Mermelio targets, I guess you could say. We have the one Trap Tricks Trap Hole Nightmare and the one Bottomless. Of course, just for Mermelio targets. We have two Mermelios, so of course I wanted to try and squeeze in two targets just so we can use them, and so our Mermelios don't become dead in our hand. Moving on, we have our two copies of Mirror Force. Again, much like Fiendish Chain, this deck is not very strong in that it doesn't have really good stat monsters. So having the Mirror Force to just help us to just get general protection is really, really helpful. Then for the rest of the trap lineup, we have just good one-of traps, starting off with the one copy of Jar of Avarice. Now, I have Avarice in here instead of Daigusto Emerald actually within the extra deck, for the fact that Avarice actually recycles you 5 cards instead of 3. And I personally didn't like constantly having to go into Emerald and wasting a rank 4 play just so I can recycle my cards. So I rather would have a different option so that I can just keep using my rank 4s and keep using my rank 4 toolbox more aggressively. So that is why I do have the one Jar of Avarice as my recycling outlet. And then finally we have the one copy of Ring for simple removal, the one copy of Solemn to prevent big wombo combo summonings, and then we have the one Torrential to have more board clear. So, that will be it for our 40 card main deck as per usual, because I don't believe I ever had a main deck that was above 40 cards just yet. Now, moving on to the extra deck, of course, we have our 3 obligatory copies of Gear Gigan X, because Gear Gigan X is the one we will be going into the most often, as he is our big spam play of the deck, so of course we have to run him at 3, just so we have the 3 copies to just keep summoning. Moving on, we have just general good rank 4s in the form of one Castell for general removal, the one Dark Rebellion so that we can actually have a big stick in the extra deck. We have the one Gagaga Samurai to help us with some OTK potential. We have the one 101 to act as, again, more sort of simple removal as well as to act as a more defensive option compared to Castell. Then we have the one Ragna Zero for stuff like the odd Madolchi and or Clayford matchup. We have the one E-Knight because more board clear man. Then we have the 2 Tellarknight XYZ monsters, if I can just grab them really quick. We have the one Constellar Diamond and the one Tellarknight Ptolemaeus, of course, for the Shaddoll and Burning Abyss matchup. Then we actually still run one rank 3 in the form of one number 20 Giga Brilliant, because we never know when we might ever have a Mark II and a Geargiano on board. So that will be it for the XYZs. Now, moving on to the 3 Syncros that we do run to support our Gen X ally Birdman. We have our one copy of Goyo Guardian for whenever we have a Birdman and some sort of Geargiano monster on our board. Then we have two level 7s in the form of the one Clearing Synchro Dragon and the one Black Rose. Of course, Clearing is here for things like that Clayfort and that Necros matchup. And then we have Black Rose again for more board nuking, as if you guys didn't figure that out by now. So, that will bring us to the end of this updated Geargia profile for this brand new July 2015 format. I hope you all did enjoy. And as always, this is Kyurem from the Trinity of Lift. And I'll see all of you guys later. Peace out.